Again, meetings at 4 o'clock, and we want to be respectful of your time so that you can get to work and do what you need to do. I'm Lisa Goodwin, the Deputy City Manager here, and on October the 26th, we had the initial meeting of the landlords and presented to them. And what I have provided to you, of course, is just the meat of what we discussed on October the 26th, which were the three options. And the option that was selected by the landlords at that time was option 3, that they come up with the plan that would be acceptable to the city. And so that's why we're here today. We ask those who were interested in serving on that committee to acknowledge that on their way out. They put the check mark by your name. There were 22 of the 60 that were at that meeting that opted to serve on the committee, and of course a sign up there, but that did not prevent anyone else from coming and attending the meeting. But at any rate, those who are here, whether it's the committee members or just other landlords, you have the voice. It's going to be your decision on what you want to do, as long as it's something that the city can agree on. I want to thank City Councilor Charmaine Crabb for being here, and she has been very instrumental in helping us through this process. In the back, you have the Director of Public Works, Michael Criddle, and the Director of our Inspections and Codes, Ryan Pruitt, and thank them both for being here as well. And there will be representation from the Sheriff's Office. The Assistant City Attorney, Lucy Sheftall, was supposed to be at this meeting. She did not even attend council today because she's ill, but I have her on the phone. And so what I'm going to ask is that for those with, you have your questions or whatever your comments are, if you will please come to the mic, because we certainly want her to hear, not yet, but we want her to hear what's being said, so that I will put a microphone so that you could hear her response, okay? But at this point, I want to call up your chair. The chair of this committee, this landlord committee, is Tom Calhoun. He will come and he will facilitate the furtherance of this meeting and the dialogue. Again, thank you. Mr.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Just a quick background, as has been stated, there were 3 options given with regard to removing bulk items from the right-of-way after evictions. Both 1 and 2, the first 2 options entailed a $500 eviction fee. One was paid in advance, one is paid after the fact. But we do have a third option, and that was for property managers, landlords to get together and come up with a solution that's better than option 1 and 2. One quick thing, and I've had a good conversation with Councilor Crabb. The city attorney and the sheriff have looked at the law, the eviction laws, and they have indicated there is no law that states a landlord must put the tenant's belongings on the right-of-way for them to retrieve them. It's always been a custom, but there is no law. So apparently the items can be removed with no delay, so it's not a blight to the city. But anyway, I personally, I'm not in favor of number 1 or number 2. I would be in favor with a 4-day period in which landlords have to clear the right-of-way in front of their property of debris, or maybe 3 business days. And there's also been some talks about contractors hired to do evictions being allowed to take the bulk items to the landfill and have the landfill fees waived, provided they show proof that the bulk items they have were for an eviction. I think that's a great start, and that's something that I would be in favor of. So I think really the landlords are helping the city out by getting rid of what can potentially be a mess, and I think the the city could help the landlords by letting us expedite the process, waiving the fee. We can get our property rent-ready much quicker. So that's what I'm in favor of, and I'd like to hear from everybody else what they might be in favor of, so we can get everybody's ideas.
And please know that any comments you make here will be recorded. So we'll be able to go back and look and make sure that we've caught all of your points. It's not live right now on CCGTV, but it will be rebroadcast. But again, this will give us opportunity to make sure that we capture all of your notes and comments.
Anybody have any suggestions? My interpretation from the city's proposal was that the landlord had to give the tenant 24 hours to retrieve their belongings. And if the tenant did not, then on the 25th hour, the city would do it and charge $500. But
Well, see, by the time we let it sit out there for 24 hours, everybody's gone through it. That's why if we're going to set it on the city right away, or we setting it on our property, but if, either way, we should be able to just carry it on off right then and it be gone.
yeah, well,
We can, that can be done with 24 hours notice prior to set out.
By who?
At
Lucy, you
least,
wanna respond to
at
that?
least 24-hour notice prior to set out. It has in the past been done by the sheriff's department, and we do have Captain Stinson here that can answer some of our questions if we have to. But I think kind of what we need to work on maybe is how that 24-hour notice is delivered, because Sheriff Countryman has expressed, you know, the lack of manpower in order to do that. And so I think that is kind of the pivotal point right there, is the 24-hour notice to the landlords, you know, like, I mean, to the tenants. It's tacking or delivering it. I think tacking is probably the best way, but,
But now, the ones who actually show up for court, the judge gives them 7 days, or they can take 7 days, and they know that. The ones that come to court.
Lisa, does that, I mean, Lucy, does what the judge give them could that be considered the 24-hour, at least the 24-hour notice?
I think 24 hours is definitely safe. I think the question is whether we can if there's a proper notice, let it run before the actual set out time.
What happens is the judge does give the tenant a 7-day notice, and so we're wondering, does that count as that 24-hour notice?
No, I don't think it would, because they don't know a specific time when it's going to happen. They just know that it can't happen for 7 days.
Say that one more time, Lucy.
Yes, I don't think the 7-day notice would be the same thing, because it doesn't give them an exact moment their property is going to be set out.
She's right. I mean, when you go to court, see, they already have 7 days. That's more than 24 hours. And the judge gives them 7 days, and it ain't always 7 days that the sheriffs can set them out. Sometimes it's usually after that. But they are on hold for 7 days. Now, that's the ones that do come to court. The ones that don't come to court don't get that.
So they've already been given more than 2 months because
More than
it's
24, they've been given 7 days.
They've
exactly.
been given 7 days is their point, Lucy.
Anytime after that, they can be set out.
I understand, they've been given a maximum time, not an exact time. And, I did speak with the judge, and, you know, he obviously doesn't want to get involved in this process and all, but he did indicate that he has concerns about tenants having adequate notice on and the ways the 7-day notices are served, and just that there be an adequate opportunity to retrieve a reasonable opportunity to retrieve the property. And I know certainly an argument can be made that, you know, they know it could happen anytime in this window, therefore there shouldn't need to be any further notices. But, you know, what we don't want to do is put in effect an ordinance that's going to make the landlords at risk for converting someone's property.
Can you all understand her? Not really. Yeah, her voice, she's sick, her voice is, okay.
See, our
Now,
thing
what
is, we set it out there for 24 hours. Everybody goes through it, not just the tenant, everybody.
Yeah, everybody goes through it, yeah, and that's how it gets to where it is. all
That's
over the
why we
place.
want to be able to get it right then. We have the sheriffs there with us, we have our guys that set it out, and we have our trucks, and we have bags. So at that point, that's the best time to get rid of it.
And so, Lucy, if you can hear him, he's saying that the best time is once it's set out, then that's the opportunity for the landlords to go ahead and do what they've got to do to remove it. The tenants have already had opportunity, they've already had notice, and the landlords just want to clear it before others start coming in and scavenging.
Well, and I've looked at some other ordinances, and, for instance, the city of Thomaston actually requires that it be containerized once it's set out and then removed.
And she's saying she's looked at some other ordinances from other cities, and they require containerization. And that once it's containerized, then, you know, it won't go everywhere, but then that's still giving them opportunity to remove their stuff, but in a more structured way, because it's now containerized.
Are you talking about
That's
like
what
putting it in a
others-
fenced-in area? Is that what you're trying to say, or a
Well,
dumpster?
a dumpster container.
So then you got to pay for a dumpster to sit there for 24 hours?
Yeah, we know that's another, but again, these are just, you
Yeah,
know,
I know,
she's
I know,
just,
yeah.
you know, at the end of the day, I mean, we want to hear from you all, and so that's what we're doing here. But she's giving you what she knows in terms of her legal opinion, okay?
Let me tell you this real quick. When we get our notice from the sheriffs, it's a phone call.
And let me also say that, you know, there are not clear exact guidelines. There are cases where it's been held that people have gone too far, and cases that have been held where there was enough protection. 24 hours is one of those cases where it was held there was sufficient protection. There definitely seems to be a feeling from the court that the set out is a separate step along the way to the property finally becoming abandoned at the end of the execution of the writ. But, you know, I think it's worth a shot at saying that if they get an exact 24-hour notice right before the set out, then the set out can be immediate and the property could be removed immediately. But that depends on, you know, the ability and willingness of the sheriff's office to provide the 24-hour notice.
I know they're having a difficult time, really, in terms of clarity, Lucy, understanding you. And so I think what we will do is let's just go ahead and get all the comments. Let's hear from them, and then we will then have time, you know, to look at the recordings, get all the notes, then answer it so that the next meeting, or what we can do with the most emails that we have, we can send you out the responses and then continue, you know, and that way you will have information to make some other decisions. Is that okay? Because I know it's hard for you all to kind of understand because she is ill.
All right, let me say one thing. Used to, when we did it with the marshals, we would walk from getting our writ to the marshal's office, and they would schedule the time right then and write it down and hand it to you. Now, you hand it to the sheriffs, and they call you in the next day or two and schedule it. So we don't have nothing in writing either. Like, otherwise, we could go post it on the door and take a picture of it posted on the door. But the sheriffs don't do it like the marshals did it. It's different. They wait a day or two, or they call you back with your date.
Okay. Okay.
I'm Don Johnston, and I may be the only one thinking the way I'm thinking, so I don't know, but if the city inspector told me I had to paint the outside of my house, could I knock on my door and tell the tenant that it's their responsibility to paint my house? No, right?
Say that again.
If the city inspector told me I had to paint the outside of the house, could I go knock on the door and tell the tenant that's their job, because they living in my house, they need to paint my house? And the answer is no. And this is what the city is doing to the landlords. You tell us their property is our property. We're supposed to pay for their property. It's not, it don't belong to us. Just like my house don't belong to the tenant.
It is your property as a landlord.
Right, but you expect them to paint the house, but what you, the council, and everyone, you trying to make the landlords be responsible for something. That's the tenant stuff, it don't belong to the landlord.
But they are left in the landlord's house.
Yeah.
In order for you to, the owner's house, in order for you to do your job as the landlord and re-rent that property, you're gonna have to do something with that.
Yes, and we've been doing that for
those
40
possessions.
years since I've been into it, but we can't help it, the city don't pick the trash up, and people go through the garbage. We
But
do
now-
everything the marshals, sheriff tells us to do.
Yeah, now the city is not responsible. The city has done it all these years, but the city is not responsible for cleaning up a for-profit business.
Since when? You've been doing it all?
My point is the city has always done it, and now it's time to change that and now put that responsibility back on the property owner, not just the landlord, but the property owner. The city cannot continue to do that. So that's why we are where we are today.
Okay, what's the difference me putting a tenant out and someone dying next door putting stuff out, someone cleaning a yard sale putting that stuff out? There's no difference.
There's a difference in that it's a
Explain that.
process that you have initiated. It's a process that you have initiated. I think we're beyond the city picking it up. The city has already made the determination that we will not pick up that property when there is an eviction, because we have so many other issues going on in terms of waste in the city. We can't continue to do that. I think at the last meeting, of course, we indicated, the lack of resources that the city has. We're already behind in picking up waste from for-profit businesses, such as the landlords. So we can't continue to do what we've always done, because we're going to keep getting the same result. And the same result is a dirty community that we have to live in. So we're not going to continue to do that. So that's why we're here today, to come up with the process that you can help us with to ensure that when that eviction is set out, that the neighbors are not having to look at that, live through that. People aren't able to come in, scavenge, and then the winds blow and stuff is everywhere. That's the problem that we have. So the question is, why are we not doing what we've always done? Because we're trying to get it right.
And let me ask you a couple more questions. I ain't trying to, you said in council meeting that at least 5 people call out sick or something every week. Is that normal? Or do you keep people who call out sick all the time?
We can't keep people from calling out sick.
So
When
that's
they're
okay
sick, they're sick. The city attorney is sick
like
right
your new
now,
job
so
over
there's
there.
nothing that we can do about that.
And 2 other things. I feel like you rushing, you want it done next week, and
Well, we certainly want it done before 2022.
you get on council and say, well, we got 122 cases this month.
That's right.
But you fail to say most of that was due to Corona, I'm sure. There hadn't been 122
no.
for the last 3 or 4
The
years.
same time that I said it was 122 in September, I told you it was 56 in July, 57 in August, and then 122 in
But that's due to
September.
Corona.
That's due to 56 and 57 is not due to Corona, because that's typical. 122 is. But even with that, it matters not. We still have to come up with a process. And so we need your help to help us come up with that
I guess I'm
process.
a little upset because landlords hadn't got rent, some of us, for 6 or 8 months or a year due to Corona.
I
And
get
then-
it.
And then we had this problem, the city.
Sure.
Can't get help, but then they don't want to throw more on the landlord. It went up $25 at the sheriff's department. Just more and more on the landlords. It don't seem fair.
I think what we're trying to do is come up with a
And
solution.
that's why I just want to bring
We're
it
trying to
up.
come up with a solution. Remember, I sit in the same seat that you sit in. I too am a landlord. And I know that whatever you decide will affect me as well and my properties. I get it, but the thing is, I'm responsible for my properties. And so I'm responsible for the way they look. And those neighbors that street that has to live around my property, if I have it looking any kind of way, at the end of the day, that tenant is now gone. It's my property that is now making the whole neighborhood look bad. I'm responsible for that.
I'm responsible. I know a couple of landlords, and I think
Yes.
we do a good job, I promise.
I'm sure there are a lot of.
You know, we got good landlords,
do
bad
great.
landlords, good
That's right.
tenants, bad tenants.
Yeah,
So-
but we need a solution.
So I'm just trying to,
I get it, absolutely. But we need a solution, and we just need your help.
Thanks, Don. Does anybody else want to have any other suggestions of what we can come up with?
Yes, my name is Don Hicks. I just had a few questions for the committee here, and fact is that she replied that it's not our responsibility anymore because of resources. And where do resources come from? I mean, not employees, but you already said you had contract, people you can have for contract to do this job for the city that call out or who's sick, or you just can't find any help. So what resources have you been using before to do that?
This meeting is not to discuss that kind of stuff. What this meeting is all about is to give landlords the opportunity to come up with a plan on how they are going to work with the city in order to keep the bulk waste from evictions off of their property and off of the right-of-way, and to keep the city clear from the eviction debris.
Well,
That's what this meeting is about, and I'd kind of like to keep it on that subject, instead of asking, the assistant city manager about, resources and things like that. That's not what we're here to discuss. We're here to discuss a landlord's plan to deal with this problem.
I'm using the word that she used. She said of the resources. So I'm just repeating what she was saying, ma'am. So she initiated that word, so I didn't bring it up. I was just giving a question to what she was saying.
Do you have a plan that you would like to present on how the debris from an eviction can be cleared from the property in a timely manner so it doesn't spread around the neighborhood and become a nuisance to the neighbors?
Well, the issue is, I guess, this $500 that we are talking about. That's the big thing. So that is the issue. It always boils down to finances. So I was just wondering what happened to the resource before, because as we all know, taxes are still being raised every quarter. We're paying out. What are these funds going to?
Well, first of all, I want to say I sympathize with everybody here, for as long as I can remember, the city has picked up bulk waste. I do think we had a perfect storm. We had an eviction moratorium that had a backlog of evictions, and then in September, we had a lot of them at the same time that we had a labor shortage. And there was a problem. But I think even before that, the city was struggling to pick up bulk waste, and from a landlord's perspective, it became an issue with us because we'd wait 1 week, then we'd wait a second week, and then citizens would go through the items, make a mess. We'd pay someone to clean that up, tidy it up, wait for the city to get it. They still don't get it. And then we ended up just having to get our own people to haul it off anyway. And I'm with you. The $500 option is just not tenable for for me or any of my landlords, so that's why I'm here to find a solution that is a lot better than that. I think we can clear the debris much more efficiently and get something done. But I'm with you. You know, that was the old way, but it just looks like if we don't come up with a solution, they're gonna come up with a solution, and I'd rather us business people come up with a solution that we can live with.
Well, they gave us a list of all these contractors they can call, so the workforce is there. They keep saying they don't have employees to do that. And, you know, like I was saying, I know you are with us, but I don't feel that by saying that I'm gonna go against what you're saying, but it's just the fact that it all boils down to the finance issue and the resources, because she said now they're gonna do it the right way, which I guess they're saying before it was the wrong way, but now she said that was because of resources. What are you definition of resources? What's your definition of that?
We're here to come up with solutions. And if you don't have a solution, then we can answer these types of questions in another forum. But right now, there's other landlords here that want to work together to try and submit a solution that you guys come up with, because you don't like option number one, you don't like option number two. So let's get together as landlords and come up with an option number three that we can submit back to, council and the city government, that you guys can live with and that they'll accept. That's what we're here today to do. That's our goal. And so if the questions that you're asking, they're legitimate questions, and we would love to answer them, just not in this forum. That's not what this forum is about.
Well, this is all too resolution to what the issue is, because the resolution is the eviction process of bulk waste. So what forum would that be proper etiquette to bring that up, since it's basically the origin of the whole issue?
Well, let me say that the city's preferred option is number 2. And so when you mention those bulk waste vendors that we have, our solution is that we will use those bulky waste vendors, all 18 of them. And what we will do, the city will pay them to come out and take care of the eviction waste. And then we're gonna bill you, the landlord, the property owner, $500, and that you would have to pay that before you're able to get another eviction. We would not handle another eviction unless you pay first the $500. That was not the option that those in attendance wanted, and so that's why we said you can come up with another. That's the only option that we have, is to use those persons in that way. That's why the city contracted with them, because we can't even go out and pick up all of the waste that's out there on the streets right now because of a lack of resources. That's why we're paying them $250 a ton. And so we can use those same ones to come out and pick up the waste from the eviction. And that's what we will do if we see that you're not able to come up with something. We have to come up with something, but we want your help to come up with something outside of that plan.
Yes, I mean, we're going around in circles basically.
I don't think so. I think I've answered. You've asked me what those resources were for. I've answered that, sir.
No, I asked them where the resources at. Where are they?
Those are the resources, 18 bulky waste vendors. Those are our resources.
No, the funds to finance these resources. That's what I'm referring
The
to.
funds to finance them is coming out of the city's general budget. It's coming out of taxpayer dollars.
Correct. That's the origin. And taxes are
That's
going
right.
up. So where does tax money go?
I've already indicated, you pay $18 for the garbage fee for 4 pickups. And I don't want to go back through that presentation again. And that is for household waste, recycling, bulky waste, and for yard waste. Bulky waste is what you put out, not eviction waste, totally different. But I'll certainly be open to have a one-on-one with you if you want, but I want to give others an opportunity as well.
Yes, I was the only one standing up at the time, but I was just basically saying, it was for us renters, we stayed at a different standard of taxes anyway from a normal homeowner, just because of commercial property, so.
I get it. As I indicated, I'm a landlord. I get it.
Yes. Well, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Don.
I'm listening. Our last speaker was absolutely dead on. There is money in the city budget. We pay taxes, and we pay them through the nose because we have the highest ad valorem taxes in the state of Georgia for commercial property, partially because of the tax freeze and all that. Now, all these years, the city has been picking up this stuff. Part of the money, it's in the budget. So it's a question of how much budget. Why don't let's form a committee, let's go out there and see if we can find some private contractors that will work for cheaper than the ones the city has found, and let the city pay the bill. But by golly, we pay the taxes. And here it is, we just passed another SPLOST, so we could tear down a perfectly good building and put up another one for $200 million. Why wasn't any money allocated for this serious problem in that SPLOST if it was an issue? What I'm saying is the city wants to just be done with, washed with it, and just say, hey, you guys pay for it all of a sudden. And we'll just get out of funding this stuff at all. So he was dead on. He was talking about where's the resources, the money. The money is there in the city budget. It may not be enough to do everything that needs to be done, but it's there. So you guys want to abdicate your responsibility as a city to take care of this problem that we pay perfectly good taxes for every year. So, I'm sorry, I'm not in favor of you just pushing this off on the landlords and folks that are already burdened tremendously by taxes and by tenants that default and don't pay their rent and all that sort of thing. I don't think, the solution needs to be with the city. If you want us to go out there and see if we can find better vendors, and then issue them your way so that you could, or we'll negotiate a price on them that's better than the price you got from the private contractors now, fine. But not our money. We have to spend our money doing the things we do, paying the taxes that are supposed to pay for this service. Okay?
I think where we get mixed up in this situation is we get, the lines are blurry between residential, what you pay for residential trash pickup, which is, and this is actually a for-profit business. Any retail establishment out there, they pay for trash pickup from another service. They have their dumpsters, they have all of these things. The lines get a little bit blurry when this is a residential property and garbage gets set out. And I agree with the person who spoke earlier about, this isn't just an eviction issue. This happens, when people move from one house to the other. We're in real estate. We see how it happens. Sometimes we take a listing and the owner has moved out and they leave stuff on the in the yard. So this isn't just an eviction issue. But once again, we are here to try and come up. We deal with this on a regular basis. We have knowledge of what we're dealing with, the frustrations and all of this. And so who better than to come up with a plan than us? And that's what we're here for today.
Hi, I'm Yolanda Durbin with G Dwellings Property Management and Grant Dwellings as well. I think the solution may not just lie with the landlords, but also in conjunction in coming up with 4 solutions that also involve the tenants. Because we're having to take on the brunt of the responsibility of clearing out their items that they brought into our properties, maybe we can incorporate some type of, not penalty, but some kind of community service, if it comes to that involves the tenants. Okay, that is your I guess, the penalty for leaving your items in said owner's property. Because as it stands now, if they are evicted and they choose to up and leave and not take any of their belongings, they have absolutely no consequence, other than possibly having the owners take them to court through a civil action. So other than that, they're, c'est la vie, they're off with their lives. They have no other responsibilities to the mess that they left. So if we start incorporating consequences for the tenant, if they so decide to leave or whatever, now of course there are some situations where that can't be prevented. If they're ill, there was a passing, whatever, those extenuating circumstances are. But for those who have just decided to not do the right thing, I think there should be some involvement on their behalf also, which would, I think, eliminate a lot of the, I probably shouldn't leave all of my items in this house. I should probably take as many things with me as I can. And to also speak to Ricky's point, I think it's a great idea. Maybe we can revise the eviction process so that we're not having to do a double process when it comes to evicting the tenants. Where they've been given ample time past the court date. If they show up, then the judge, of course, presents the option of having the 7 days to remove their items at that time. But if they don't, then we come up with some kind of tack and mail or system that we coordinate maybe with the sheriff's office to get that delivered promptly, and that be, adequate enough to give them time to remove their items. But from that point, you eliminate the majority of the issue if we're allowed as landlords to go in immediately after that time period is up and remove the items ourselves from the house to the dumpster, because they've had that adequate time. They've been told you have 7 days to remove your items and vacate the property, and they're making that choice within that 7-day period to either stay and wait to the last minute. But again, that would be their responsibility and not the owners. And then beyond that, then those are the consequences. So I think possibly there could be a solution where we involve tenant responsibility as well, so that maybe it'll kind of drive it home that you got a stake in this too. So
I think that's a good point. I agree with just about everything you said. One thing that is sort of along the lines of consequences is there have been credit reporting agencies that have solicited us to use their credit reports, and they tout that they can let you know if a tenant has been evicted in so many states or counties or whatever. And one of the counties that did not participate was Muskogee. And so I wonder if someone with the city could look into that, and that way we could have some consequences for tenants, and property managers could get that information before they rent.
Do you know the name of that company?
Well, the software we use is Folio, and they have a credit reporting mechanism in the software, and I can look at it in further detail, but I just remember when we looked at it, Muskogee County was not a county that was participating, so we opted out of that service because of that.
You've opted out of, the credit agency
The
service,
credit
not
aspect of it,
Folio,
yeah,
because we
yeah.
use that Folio
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
So, that seems like that would be something very simple, that Muskogee County could report that. I don't know who, I don't know if it comes from the sheriff's department, or, I would think that it would come from the sheriff's department, because that's who does all of our evictions now.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why we didn't do it in the past, because the marshal would do some evictions and the sheriff would do others. Now, so now that they're consolidated, maybe it'll be easier for us to report those evictions, but I like that idea.
Okay.
I mean, just,
Those are
I
good
mean,
comments. Thank you.
that's it, just the shared responsibility, tenants.
Sure.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jane Dunn. I agree with this lady. As you do, Tom, I think there's certainly some benefit to having the tenants responsible for a portion of this. But
Can you come up just a little bit,
My
ma'am?
main question is, do we still have the assistant city attorney on the line?
Yes.
I have a question about, and I find this unique, I'm a former property manager, former broker from elsewhere. Muskogee County is new to me in the last 10 years, but I find part of I think where we're at, number one, boils down to money. It's $500 more that a landlord is going to be expected to pay because a tenant didn't do. And when we're already out several months rent, more than likely, in most recent cases, in my case, a writ issued on October 30th, the sheriff's office can't get there until November 30th. So we're talking about another month that not only am I not getting rent from the current tenant, I cannot rent the property out. But my question to the attorney is, Columbus or any municipality able to strictly or strengthen the state laws that that the sheriff's office operates under, that we operate under as landlord-tenant law? Does the city have a right to strengthen laws locally for our community?
Did you hear that, Lucy? Lucy?
You're talking about strengthening the landlord-tenant law on the state level?
Those that pertain to eviction?
That would have
Yes,
to
ma'am.
be done by the General Assembly.
So
Anything that's specifically provided by the state law, we cannot contradict in an ordinance.
I would not say that my intent was to contradict, but to strengthen, to make it stronger.
Yes, I
Make the
think,
law strong.
Lucy, similar to what we do during our legislative agenda each year, where we actually will go and ask our delegation.
Right.
Yes, so that we.
Yeah, we can always make
we
those
can do that.
requests, yes, absolutely.
Yes, we can make that request.
Digging deeper.
Jane, can you be specific on when you're saying strengthen? What specifically do you think you're asking for to strengthen?
That the length of time, for instance, once the writ is issued and signed by the judge, because the tenant has appeared and contested, they're given an extra 7 days beyond the date of the writ. They're aware of that because they're in the courtroom. The judge does an excellent job of explaining it all to them. I feel like for Columbus landlords, if we could enact a law that said once that 7-day period is up, the tenant's possessions are no longer the tenant's possessions. If they are still in the landlord's home, in the landlord's property, then they do in fact become the landlord's property. Number one, then we can bring in our regular crews, take it off all at once, and it never stays on the curb. I feel like the length of time that it takes from the time my property manager files the eviction request until it gets to court, especially when a tenant contests, and I understand that I've never seen a tenant actually pay money into the court for the privilege of contesting. But I think that if that were done, we probably wouldn't have as many contested evictions, but that's another subject. I just feel like at some point as a city, we should be able to strengthen this to say, okay, it shouldn't be the city's problem, it shouldn't be an extra $500 to the landlord, and it shouldn't blight the curb by sitting there and being picked through by the vultures after the 24 hours. We have a hard time finding resources too for bulk waste.
Well, Lisa, let me
without anything.
make one point clear, which is that under the state law, we are certainly allowed, and probably will no matter what happens with this, we can certainly make an ordinance that says in Columbus, Georgia, eviction property is not to be set on city right-of-way. I mean, that can be done. That's actually what's anticipated by the state law, and it's only because our executing officers have traditionally permitted it to be on the right-of-way that it's ever been on the right-of-way to begin with.
What I'm proposing would eliminate the need to set it on the curb, period. Now, could this be enacted by the end of the year so that it goes into effect in January? No. I'm just saying that I see there's a lot deeper issues that should be addressed, and I'm not sure where to take that, but I think it would be a good solution for this group
That's right.
in the
Right.
long run, certainly not in the next 60 days.
Sure. Okay.
Yes.
Good comments.
Is there someone I can contact within the city who could point me in the right direction?
You can
Maybe-
contact me.
Okay.
Call me, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jane.
Can we get Officer Stinson up to talk about this?
Officer Stinson, can you come up?
Can you explain to us the eviction process from the sheriff's department? And is there something that the sheriff's department can work with the landlords on this set-out day, that they can actually take the property away on set-out day instead of setting it on the property?
First of all, thanks for inviting us here. Everybody should know that the sheriff's office has nothing to do with the eviction process other than serving the eviction notices, the risk of possessions. Then we show up, when the eviction is scheduled, we show up at the eviction site to secure that scene to make sure it's safe for the landlord to take possession of it. Nowhere in the law does it provide for the sheriff's office to put their hands on any property other than something that is illegal in there, i.e. drugs or something that cannot be put out onto the property itself. We'll take any drugs, firearms that are left there, or weapons, pornography, things like that, and we'll secure them for the owner to come and pick them up. After 90 days, we can then do something through court order to take care of them. But the sheriff's office will not put their hands on anything, nor can we tell you what to do with any property on there. The sheriff's office is not in that chain at all. All we are doing is making sure that it's a safe site and that those writs are carried out. When the judge signs that writ, that is a command for us to go out and give you, the landlord, possession of that property, period. It is not to say for us to divvy up who can get it, where it goes, how it goes. That's why all we do is require you to have the people there to get it out of the house to give you possession of that property, period. That is all the sheriff's office is going to be able to do. And if we do anything else, now the sheriff's office has now incurred liability for that property. That's why whenever we get property, we have to do a report on it, put it in our property evidence section, and give it 90 days, and then dispose of it through the legal process. That is the extent of which the sheriff's office can do it. Any law enforcement throughout the state, that is how it's done. They cannot decide what the landlord does with the property. None of that is within our purview.
But you don't let us carry it with us.
No, it is by law. That's the sticky point for us. If you put it on the landlord's property, it can't be abandoned. It says after we leave, it becomes abandoned property. If it is still on the landlord's property, how can it ever become abandoned?
So that's why at set out, you want to put it on the landlord's property, not on the right-of-way, because then it becomes the landlord's property. When you guys leave the scene, it belongs to the landlord. And then the landlord can take it right then and there.
Well, we won't say that, but I think, I wasn't here when this, think that the process of setting it on the right-of-way was enacted. But just in my general knowledge of why it was probably done was because just that the law says that when we leave, it becomes abandoned property. It's just like setting your trash can out. They want you to set it out on city property because that way they can't come on my property and get trash. It has to be on city curtilage. So that's why I'm surmising now, this was long before I got into this business probably, but that's probably why they said set all that stuff onto the right-of-way so that it becomes abandoned when we leave. So that way it's not the landlord's problem anymore. I don't know, I'm not a legalist. I'm just saying that's probably why we always set it on the right-of-way, because the law specifies once we leave, if the tenant is not there to take possession, it is abandoned property. And if it's on private property, how does it ever become abandoned? And I'm not the legal person for that. But.
Lucy, did you hear that conversation?
Yes, mhm. He's talking about removing the trash, yeah.
Okay. And we are saying now that the city's position is that the set out should be from this point forward on private property, not on public property.
That's correct. And that's actually what the officer has designated another place. It's to be on the property of the landlord. Yeah, another place could be designated somewhere entirely different for safekeeping, or, you know, in our case, we have for years designated the right-of-way.
That's the sticking point that we always
I
have.
understand, that's right, yes.
Was there, if somebody wants to speak, they can approach the,
It's down a little bit, I'm a very short person. I'm Deborah Wright, and I did hear a couple of good points today to resolve the city's issue. Number one, this young lady right here that addressed that it could be the tenant's responsibility. That seemed like a great idea, saves the landlords, saves the city, and maybe it could be addressed to their water bill since that's where trash pickup is picked up. That sounded like a great idea. Okay, and then I know y'all have a problem getting stuff off the right away because I've seen it sit there. And if maybe it sits there or something like that and they don't come pick it up, because I believe in letting them have a chance to come pick up their stuff. Maybe they couldn't get it out by their date. Maybe they did need a day or two more. You know, I just got a soft heart for people, and I hate that. Maybe they could come pick it up a couple of days later. And then if it's not picked up, maybe 72 hours after that time, be the landlord's responsibility to get a truck, get a crew again, and get it to the landfill. Those are just two thoughts. And then keeping it in the house, that sounds like a great idea. Saves the city from having to go out and to do that job. So y'all could spend that time and money doing other things for the community. So that's just my thoughts on it.
thank you.
Thanks.
Any more questions for us?
I don't think so. I think we just needed that clarification, so I appreciate it.
And I'm Major Curtis Lockett. I'm over the Uniform Patrol Services Bureau, so any of the actually execution of the evictions, that comes through my bureau. The administrative part of it, when you come and file, all that comes under Major Parker through Captain Stinson. That is why we're both here, so we can answer those two parts. The administrative part, how you get it to us, and then how we go about doing the actual eviction. So if you need me, you can come.
I'm actually answering your question, why the difference is why you're not getting the the eviction date when you come to the office anymore. Okay, so within the last 2 years, the city purchased a new court management system, Odyssey. All courts are going through that, every legal attorney, all attorneys are now e-filing, so it's all online. You're able now, if you'll go to the city website, go to the sheriff's office page and look up where it says inmate search, it'll bring you to a page, and at the bottom, you can look at the bottom, it'll have an Odyssey lookup. You can actually look up and see when your paperwork is being served, when it's been served without having to call, without having to, it's automatically, as soon as we get it back to our office, scan it through, we return it back to that court, it updates through that Odyssey system so that you can look up your writs and your summons and dispose online. But the reason why we can't set up an eviction date right then and there is because the clerks have to process it and send it through Odyssey to our tracking system is civil serve. And that's when we enter in, pass it through, and that's how we keep up with what papers are being served, setting up evictions, and going through that process. So that's the 1 or 2 day delay. But I mean, currently we are running, I just looked at the calendar, probably 2 weeks with the exception of not doing evictions during Christmas, the week of Christmas, and the week of Thanksgiving.
October the 30th, I wasn't given the date, I was called a day later, told November 30th.
Okay. The only explanation I can give you is we did suffer the loss of 3 officers within a month's time, within a month and a half's time. And when that happened, I mean, pretty much everything shut down for us to carry on the proper services for those officers. I know that was a huge delay, and it's just one of those things that, we don't account for those things that happen, but when they do happen, plus I know there was a lot of rain between October and November. We don't do them we can't do them in the rain or inclement weather. If it's sprinkling, then there's a thing, but the officers that go out and determine what the inclement weather is.
But do y'all move them up? Like last week I had 3 evictions, we ended up only having 1 that morning.
Mhm.
And we went to that one and it did take 15 minutes. The other 2 was canceled. So what happens then? You actually have allotted for 3. Do y'all go back and try to move people up?
So what we do is we set up a 9 o'clock, a 10 o'clock, or we set up a 9 o'clock, a 10 o'clock, an 11 o'clock, and then 2 1 o'clocks, and then a 2 o'clock on Monday through Thursday, with the exception of Fridays. Now for the 9 and 10 o'clocks, we typically hold those for mass properties like apartment complexes or stuff like that, when they have like 10 or 15 units to do at one time. So instead of us going back and forth, we can knock out that group. But yes, I mean, we do, as long as there's a 72-hour change in the time, because we are not sending any notification to the tenant. We go through, we can set it up, we can make that change within our calendar.
How could we reinstate giving notices to the tenant?
What do you mean by giving notice to the tenant?
Tacking like we used to, so that's 24 hours. That's a notice so that items can actually be put into a truck, taken out of the house and put right into a truck. What needs to happen in order for the landlords to do that? Because I truly believe that idea solves everybody's problem.
We have our crew, and I know that you can come back a couple days later with your crew again, and that's how your crew come back the second time.
Exactly. So
Landlord tack it, tape a
They took it
letter
out
on
right
there, on the front door, take a picture of it, so you can prove it in front of the house. Let the landlord go and give them the 24-hour notice.
And my question is there a requirement for the 24? Because if you said that,
we can't hear you. We can't
you
understand.
said that once the eviction is complete and the sheriff's office leaves, it becomes abandoned property. So if it becomes abandoned property at that moment, wouldn't that absolve us from any liability if we were to take it to the landfill?
But I was at one last week when y'all left, and them guys were standing
remember now, a tenant, just like a landlord, can send an agent to take care of their property. So if I'm gonna get evicted, I know I have to work, and I send my brother to take care of my property, then if somebody's there, whether that be me or an agent, guess what? That property is not abandoned if somebody's there with it, that is representing the owner. Now, I'm not an attorney, I'm not trying to give you any legal advice, I'm just saying, the sheriff's office perspective is, we cannot tell anyone what property they can have. That is not our job in any law.
And they went through the stuff, and the stuff that they didn't take is still sitting there, and this was 3 weeks ago, and I went to that eviction.
I get that. But there's nothing, we can't make a decision on that because that is not our property to decide one way or the other. So we can't have as they say, the dog in that fight, because then now we're becoming an agent to decide who's going to get the property. We cannot give anyone permission to take something out of a house or to leave it in there. What the only thing we can do, if we get there and a landlord says, I just want to take possession of this house. Now, when we leave, that is your legal responsibility. And if something happens to that, if you didn't do a proper set out, now, there are remedies in the law against the landlord. You have to make sure you're within the law on any eviction. All we're there to do is make sure those things that are required by the sheriff's office are carried out. We get there, we secure that dwelling or office space or whatever it may be if it's a business. We give you possession of it. Your job as a landlord is to take that property out of your property so that the tenant, if they want it, can have access to it. If you don't do that, now I think there's going to be a legal penalty for you. Not that I'm a lawyer, but the law tells us to give you possession of the dwelling, building, not what's in it. If there's a tenant in there, that's that tenant's property. We're there to safeguard everything, your part and the tenant. We're to give you possession of the property. And we can't decide if you can leave it in, take it out. We throw our hands up and say, we don't have anything to do with it. We tried in Marshall's office to do those eviction notices. We just don't have, we ran out of manpower in the Marshall's office, but we were doing a whole lot more then, but now we're doing all of them. If you look at a whole year, you're talking about close to 9,000 pieces of paper that come through to do evictions. We don't do all of them, but we do about 4,300 to 5,000 of them. Think about adding all that paperwork onto the deputies that are we're trying to get, the sheriff's office had more than evictions to do. The Marshall's office, we didn't have divorce services, court orders, all those other things that we have to do now as the sheriff's office, on top of doing all those evictions that the Marshall's office was doing. So we have to I'm not trying to make any excuses for you, I'm just telling you what, we can't now take on the responsibility of going out and telling everybody an eviction is coming, because we just don't have the manpower. If we commit to that, you're going to expect us to do it.
But can the landlords do it? Can the landlords pick up the document?
That's a question I can't answer that.
So back to my question. If we're saying that the sheriff's office comes and gives us possession of our dwelling, and the property is placed on our property, and quote unquote, it's abandoned, when y'all leave, it's considered abandoned, then do we have any protections from us if we take it and dump it? Or are we opening ourselves up to civil liability? Is that a matter of everything being passed on to the landlord? Because, couldn't there be an ordinance or something adopted to where once it's set out on that property and y'all leave, it's abandoned, and then that gives us, if we've got legal cover to take it to the landfill, then the problem's solved. I just don't understand. So if it's considered abandoned property once the set out is done and you guys leave, if its legal status is abandoned property, then why can't we move from there? Because we're giving somebody a right for abandoned property. I mean, why would there be a right for abandoned property?
It's my understanding that it is abandoned property. However, without that 24-hour notice, the tenant has 24 hours to come and claim and reclaim this property. And that's where That's where we're getting into this issue, because if we didn't have that rule right there,
But
or
where does
if
that
we
rule
could get
come from?
around that rule somehow, then I think we'd have the problem solved.
I'm saying, but where does that, is that codified in law, or is that just our normal practice? Because these people have been notified that they didn't pay their rent. And they've
I
been
agree
notified.
with you on
Yeah.
that, and
Yeah,
we
I'm-
need clarification
yeah.
on that.
I'm saying, where does it come from? Where does the 24-hour notice come from? Where is that from?
Lucy?
Lucy, can you hear Mr. Powell? I think we've indicated is there anything in writing codified on the 24-hour notice to the tenants? Lucy? Lucy, can you hear me? She may have stepped away. We'll get a response. We'll get a response. And
I truly believe that Ricky's idea of being able to take the property immediately
Sorry,
if there's no
I was
tenant.
on mute. There are legal cases that refer, and they are just as binding as the statutes of the General Assembly, that refer to having a reasonable opportunity to retrieve the tenant's property. And in one case, in 2015, the Court of Appeals specifically said that the 24 hours was sufficient.
that the 24 hours was sufficient?
Sufficient, yes, to meet that requirement.
And I think what they want to know is, when does that 24-hour period start? Once the sheriff leaves and the material becomes abandoned, can the landlords dispose of it at that point?
Well, technically, it says that it becomes abandoned upon the execution of the writ, but then there's also the language about the reasonable opportunity to retrieve, and that's why we were trying to suggest a solution where maybe the actual notice could be given 24 hours before the set out, so that during that entire 24 hours they would still be able to retrieve it, whether it was in the house or at the set out.
Lucy, does it matter who posts on the door? Can landlords post it, or does it have to be posted by like a sheriff or an official of some sort?
The writ of execution would be the official.
The
Yeah.
the 24 hours prior to the sheriff coming.
The 24-hour notice, can the landlord place that on the property instead of a sheriff's deputy or sheriff's officer? Tape it to the front?
That's typically, that would not count as official notice from the executing officer.
Okay, all right, so it would have to come from
You
the
know.
executing officer.
So then, is the requirement for a reasonable opportunity to get the stuff, is that 24 hours a matter of interpretation, or where does that come from? Because the process itself allowed, they leave and are not there. They know they're being evicted, and they know what they're leaving. So I'm trying to understand, where's this reasonable opportunity to get their stuff? What they typically do is leave what they don't want.
Mm-hmm. What's frustrating is all the laws seem to favor the tenant, and we're stuck, we're trying to do the right thing as landlords. We're trying to do the right thing and not get in trouble, and we can't get a clear answer on what is the
Legal
right
issue
thing.
there, what's the concern in the state statute is it says the property is abandoned and that the landlord won't be considered a bailee of the property. In other words, they don't have to be responsible for its security or if someone comes and takes it off the pile. But in cases where the landlord has appropriated the property to their own use, that's when the fact that the writ of execution has happened, the courts have held, has not, been sufficient to give landlord title to dispose of the property for their benefit.
Okay, so Tom Calhoun and I had talked previously about possibly when the sheriff leaves, are we given any kind of a piece of paper when you leave, or we've already received the writ, right? I don't do very many evictions, but so I'm kind of.
We have to sign a paper with them.
And then, so are you given a paper with a set-out date?
There's a letter of transfer that we
Well, I have received a letter that I post that basically tells the people that they're not to come back on the property.
Okay, well, what we were discussing was the possibility that you have the set-out, and the landlords could take the property right then and there to the landfill, or they would have, say, 3 business days to take it to the landfill. And if they have that paper showing the date of the set-out, then when they take it to the landfill, then the landfill charges are waived. So then, gosh, I forget where I was going with this.
The only problem right now is that window of opportunity for them to get it. And if we can close that door and we've got the waiver from the landfill, then we'd be glad to get the property out of our place and take it to the landfill and be done with it. So then we can go in and try to fix our place that they just tore up.
Right. I mean, it's what all of us really do want to do. We've all been told different things, and even today we're being told different things on when we can actually take, that's what I was getting to. So we get a receipt at the landfill showing that we took it to the landfill. Then if we were to be sued, we did not use it for our own personal gain. We have receipt that it actually went to the landfill and not to something else.
Well, I guess my comment on that was, I don't know that all it would say is that you took material to the landfill. It will not say, this is what you took and from where.
True.
And so we would have no way of verifying that.
True. Okay, that's a good point. We could. That would show that it was their items. That's a good point too. So it'd be no different than us preparing for court the same way we prepare for court on an eviction. We take our own pictures. We have the receipt from the landfill, and then we just keep those in that file in case, the tenant does come back at us. Then we have our case prepared.
And again, we go through this eviction process, and those they have access to our property up until the time you guys come. They have access to our property up until the time you guys come. I don't understand why that's not a reasonable amount of time. They're in there for days and weeks until you guys come. So why do we need to afford these people that are in default another opportunity to come and get their property from in front of our place? Now that we're putting it on our private property as opposed to public property.
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. So-
I mean, it seems to me that when
Can we
they
add
stand in front of the judge and the judge gives them 7 days, that's well over 24 hours notice.
I'll offer this, and then we'll sit down, because it becomes a matter of, we're just here to help in any way we can. But since I started in the marshal's office in 2005, coming from the police side, when we were serving 24-hour notice, we're never gonna tell them when their eviction is. That's up to the landlord. But for officer safety, we'll never tell them we'll be there at 9 in the morning, because we don't want someone to set up, because we've had meth labs, people selling dope out of the houses, or they're in there with their guns and everything else, so they know we're coming. It becomes a public safety issue for us and the neighborhood itself. So we really are not advocating, telling people, hey, be ready for the sheriff's office when they come at 9 o'clock in the morning. You can give them 20, I mean, we always, if the landlord wants to, we can't tell you what to do. The sheriff's office is not gonna tell a tenant, yeah, we'll be there at 9 o'clock on Tuesday. We're not gonna do that, because that puts our deputies at risk. If somebody sets up, they wanna do something bad and we don't know who that person may be. But since 2005, we have never told people when we were coming. We went to the site. The set out was done, the eviction was completed. We leave, it was put on the right of way. I'm not a legal person. I'm not an attorney. What would be the problem if the landlord, once we leave, now it's abandoned? It's on the city right of way. But now the landlords, you still have to get that property. If you don't want to, you know, if we leave, it becomes abandoned. That's the legal question. I don't get that part when you say keep it on private property, but it becomes abandoned. Somebody in the legislature looked at that and said that, but I don't know if they actually had the practical knowledge to understand what they were really saying. So I don't know that. That'll be a fallacy.
Let me ask you a question.
If it was put on the right of way and the landlord immediately took it away after we left, would not that do the same thing for you? That's just
Let me ask you a
my
question, because we get notified when the set-out date is. What if we send them a registered letter 7 to 10 days prior to the eviction and say that you're in process of being evicted and you're in danger of leaving your property? After, we don't give them the date, but say once the eviction is executed, your property becomes abandoned property and you lose all right to reclaim the property. Why don't we just send them a certified letter that they have to sign for? And if they don't sign for it or don't come back, I mean, we'll have proof that we sent it out, that we gave them warning that they were under eviction and subject to lose their property. Why can't we just do that? And that would afford that reasonable opportunity for them to get their stuff if they want
To me,
it.
that sounds reasonable.
Yeah,
Well, I'm pretty sure that is legal language.
It's the back part of the form, it's a small paragraph. Magistrate court, it's a one piece of paper that's sent to us from magistrate court that says exactly, you know, Judge Smith either gave you 7 days or whatever to relieve the notice. When they call us and once they know that a writ's been issued against them, and they call and ask us, hey, you know my eviction date, we tell them, ma'am, the writ was signed on this date, you have, within 24 hours after this date, you could be evicted at any point in time. You need to prepare, move, leave the property.
So the writ should be the 24 hours notice.
I'm the one that y'all actually told them the day y'all were coming. We had an eviction, the people hadn't paid for 5 months. They called y'all up. Judge, we went to court, the judge gave us 7 days. When the 7 days ended, they called y'all, and y'all told them y'all had 12 more days. It was coming on the 12th of the month. You know I'm.
I do, and we addressed that issue. We had new employees that got moved over from supervision, and we have addressed that issue on the 84.
Okay.
Yes. He was new, he came from a No, we tell them, basically,
So it's hard to sit here and say they don't know, because I've had.
I don't know.
Yes.
One point I'd like to make is if an appellate court ruled that 24 hours was reasonable to allow a tenant to retrieve their belongings, then as a landlord, I'm not comfortable touching anything for 24 hours. And there may be ambiguity in the law, but we're probably not going to resolve that tonight. But, you know, just to reiterate what I said earlier, I think landlords ought to be given 3 to 4 days to clear the whole property.
I think so.
And if the tenant has 1 day, we know that the tenant's probably not going to get their belongings. We know there's a risk of a mess being made, but after that 24-hour period expires, we should have the right to clear it within 3 business days, 48 hours, whatever's been suggested. I think that's reasonable. One thing as far as the legislature, you know, I'm kind of fearful for us to be toying around with this because we know that it's already tenant friendly. And if we get into if we make a big issue of it and they start revising these laws, my fear is they might even make it more tenant friendly. So I'm okay with the laws the way they are. But one last thing is the Columbus Board of Realtors, they're meeting tomorrow at 2 o'clock. They're going to have suggestions coming out of the board. I'm going to give that to Lisa and Charmaine. And then the comments that y'all made tonight are going to be given to the officials. So I think we can come up with some good solutions. But is there any other solutions or options for us to consider?
Can I say something about
Yeah.
I think when the landlord go get a writ, I think we'll save a lot of evictions and a lot of people playing the system. I think the tenant, when they file an answer, they should have paid $44 as well as the landlord.
Well, there's actually something in the law that says at the time that they file an answer, they are supposed to tender payment of rent with the registry of the court. But it's never been, the judges have never enforced it because judges are elected officials and they want to be fair. But yeah, it's actually on the
That
books.
hurts the landlords,
Well, yeah, and because they don't pay into the registry of the court at the time of that filing, we have to rule nisi, which is a motion to compel them to pay monies into the court, and that's a separate hearing. So the reason the nisi hearing exists is because they don't pay their money into the registry of the court at the time that they file an answer.
And I think if they made them do it, the people who are serious, know they got a case, they don't mind paying it. But in the meantime, you're wasting the landlord's time, you're wasting the judge's time, everybody.
Yeah.
122 wouldn't be that, it would be about the norm.
Because the answer most of the time is we don't have the money. We
Yes.
already know they don't have the money because they didn't pay for it.
Yeah,
That's just the idea, I just think they should pay something.
I agree.
I'll try to be brief. Lisa mentioned earlier that we were here to fix the problem that the city has with the bulk waste issues. I think the 24-hour notice, I'm still not clear on. The sheriff's major said they can't do it. They don't have the personnel to do it. It's not official if the landlord does it. So somehow we need, if we could agree on something there that would be considered official, even if we're doing it to help them out because they are short-staffed. I think most of us would probably be willing to do that. Can it be determined that that notice be given 24 hours before the set-out date? That way, when the sheriff's deputies arrive, our crews arrive, the tenant has had 24 hours notice that the appellate court said was reasonable, and their stuff, if it's still there, most of which is usually trash at that point, they've gotten the good stuff. It's not like we were going to make anything off of it. But it could go directly from the house into the truck to the landfill and forget this sitting on the curb, period.
Lucy, did you hear that?
Lucy, did you hear that comment?
Yes, I was unclear as to, he was saying the 24 hours of notice would be given by the sheriff ahead of the execution.
What we would like clarification on is how what is the legal ways, and there may be more than one, of delivering that 24 hours notice? Could the writ be considered, because they're given 7 days, so that's well over 24 hours notice. Could it come from when the landlords receive the notice 2 days later of when the set out would be? You know.
No, it needs to be an executing officer, or, I mean, if the sheriff's office wanted to hire private process servers, I suppose they could take the 24-hour notices around. But it needs to be someone unassociated with either party to the proceedings. That's the important thing.
Okay.
That's why the landlord can't take care of doing it.
I'm going to say something right now as an official, you know, an elected official. We have to do better right now. We've got to figure out a way in the city of Columbus that these landlords can pick up the property that is left behind at the time of set out. And I don't know who we want to talk to, or what, do we have to send something up on a legislative agenda to change it at the state level? But we need to fix this because it is the pivotal issue of a lot of different problems with the real estate industry and the landlord industry, with the bulk waste for the city, for the neighbors that are living next to it. This is pivotal, and it's creating a problem in our city, and we need to fix it. So can the city attorney's office look into ways of helping us get around these laws and make it easier for the landlords to do what we're asking them to do?
Well, if you want to propose language to the General Assembly, we could certainly, help draft the council resolution that would recommend that as a legislative agenda item.
If that's the way we have to do, then I'll do that. But I'd like for us to be creative on a local level, because that's going to happen a heck of a lot faster. And we have a little bit more, and no, not just a little bit. We have a bit more control over that, because, everybody here is living with this, and the 10 of us are living with this, and we can vote on it, and we have control over it. We lose control when we send it up to state. So I'd like...
And just to give a little background, some of the distinctions here come from the fact that the dispossessories that are simply to get the tenant out and don't involve proper personal service and don't involve a money judgment for rent are considered differently from the actions that you bring as a personally served lawsuit to get the tenant out and recover back rent. And in those, property rights and abilities to collect might be entirely different. But we're talking about here just standard dispossession. And
can you talk to Judge Smith and get some clarification on this specific option that we're trying to achieve here? Can you see what he says so he can give us some guidance on this?
Well, yes, and the one I was mentioning in Thomaston, what they do is they require it to be put in a container for 24 hours and then removed from the property thereafter. And I think one option here might be that we simply address the fact that executing officers will no longer direct that property be put on the right-of-way, that it be set aside on the on the landlord's property as provided by Georgia law, and then we say it will be removed and no longer on the property, say, 48 hours after execution, or else the city will have the right to come remove it like it would any other complaint about junk on a property, and charge and put a lien on the property for the cost if it's not paid. So, that way We're just saying it's going to be legally set out by the sheriff, and we're saying it's not going to stay on the property more than a certain number of hours to create junk. But in between that, it's on the landlord how they decide to dispose of it. And that might be an option.
I have a question, and maybe the attorney can, how can the property be abandoned and the
I'm
property
sorry?
with property rights if it's abandoned? If the sheriff's office is saying that once they leave, execute the writ, it's abandoned property. So I'm just trying to understand, how is it abandoned property, but they've got some rights to it on our property?
That's a good question, and that's a legal question. And I don't think there's complete clarity on what is the law right now. You know, case law is important, and there was case law where a court determined that the tenant should have had a reasonable time to retrieve their belongings, and that time was 24 hours. So, you know,
But what says that reasonable time has to be after it's put out? They have the key until they come anyway.
Yeah, I agree. They should.
We don't get possession until it's out. They have possession before
Right.
we get it.
Yeah.
So once we're given possession of our property, and their stuff's put on our property, and they're not supposed to come back, what are we affording a 24-hour?
I agree. I think it's going to be problematic to suddenly change course and have the sheriffs direct the landlords to put it on private property. I think that's going to have some problems. That's correct. That's correct. They're not to come back on the property, and that's why they put it on they've always directed us to put it on the right-of-way. The only exceptions have been when the right-of-way wasn't big enough for all the belongings, then they would have it, put it on private property. But that's a discretionary thing that officer has, and sheriffs can speak more in detail about that. But I'm somewhat apprehensive about too much, asking the legislature to look into this, because again, the storage issue, 20 years ago, there was an issue where some advocates wanted landlords to store the tenants' belongings for indefinite periods of time. So again, I think the landlords here can come up with something reasonable without getting too many people involved. They don't understand the nuances of landlord-tenant relationships. I think we ought to come up with something simple and be done with it. Because if too many people get their hands in this, things could get rough. So I'm in favor of the landfill waiving the tipping fees for contractors that have eviction papers. And I'm in favor of giving the landlord 3 to 4 days to completely remove all the belongings. To me, that's simple. We don't need any legislative process with that. It would be a new city ordinance. Landlords wouldn't be waiting on the city bulk truck to come. You can get your property ready to rent, and I think that's simple. That's what I'm in favor of. But I think everybody has had good suggestions, and I hope that the city will make a good decision.
See who else is in favor of that. I like that idea.
Okay, Councilor Crabb wants to have a show of hands of who's in favor of those proposals.
Just so that, because we're going to have another meeting tomorrow with the Columbus Board of Realtors, which some of these landlords here may not be at because they're not members of that board. So we kind of need to know a show of hands so we can bring that to the Columbus Board of Realtors. So.
But we still can, once it's discussed out there in the yard, and the sheriff believes we can put it on our trailer and haul it off. I mean, what's going to stop us from doing it? We do it anyway, so. Just take
But like for those landlords that don't feel comfortable with that want to be a little bit more conservative and make sure that there's that 24 hours notice afterwards, then at least the city is allowing them a certain period of time for the landlords to choose. And also, waiving the tipping fees as an incentive and as a thank you for, you know, helping or working with us on this issue. I like that idea.
So are you suggesting that the city would abdicate any and all responsibility for the grab-alls, for removing property? In other words, the whole financial burden of moving the stuff to the landfill is going to fall on the landlords. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, except for the tipping fee.
Well, so what about the money that's in the budget for that right now, even if it's not adequate to do everything, you know? Again, we pay all these taxes, you know, and now on top of that, we're going to be responsible for removing the stuff from the right-of-way to the landfill. I don't think that's right.
You're paying $18 a month.
No, ma'am. No, correction. Correction. We are paying serious property taxes to the city of Columbus that has a budget, and a budget item in there is operating the grab-all trucks to do this very thing that they've done for years and years and years. Now, the city has a problem because we can't stay up with it. You know, we need more money, or we need more private contractors or whatever. So instead of, you know, bearing that responsibility, you're just throwing it back on the landlord, saying, you know, hey, this stuff, you're going to be responsible for hiring your own grab-all truck or mover and moving the stuff to the landfill. I don't think that's right.
I guess you and I will choose to disagree on this, just because this is what I do with all of my properties, because I don't want them to be, I do not want this bulk waste to be on my properties, you know, for one day longer than it has to be.
No, ma'am, I don't either.
Because I want to start showing that property as soon as
Right.
it's vacant. And I can't show that property with that in the front yard. And call me a control freak. I want to be in control of the property that I manage for my owners, so that I know that it's going to be rent ready with
Right.
0-day vacancies.
Listen, I'm for that too, but you know what?
So
You know,
I would
after
think
we
that
have
you would
borne
like
the
this
expense,
idea.
after we as landlords have borne the expense of being out several weeks or even months of rent, and gone through the legal process and paid for the dispossessory and paid for the writ, and have the sheriff come out, and we can't touch it until the sheriff is there, you know, and we have it set out, then on top of all of that, you want us to pick it up from where we have paid a crew to set it out and put it on some kind of a grab-all truck and take it to the landfill.
Yes, that's
So in
what
other
I'm
words,
saying.
transferring the financial responsibility of that from the city to us.
It's a business, sir. It's a business. This is part of us doing business.
This is an additional expense that we have not had up until now, up until the city has said, well, the city's got a problem, so we're going to just give the problem to you and you solve it. That's what's happening.
The city's been delivering concierge service, and we've grown too big to provide that anymore. This is a business. This is a business expense. I turn around and I charge
It is an
that
additional
to my
business
tenant's
expense.
security deposit.
It is an additional business expense,
It
and it's
is.
going to the landlords. That's exactly what's happening here.
And unfortunately, what I think might happen is we are going to have less affordable housing, because it's going to turn around. You know, we're business people. So what are we going to do? We're going to turn around and we're going to recoup our expense through raising the rent, raising security deposits to cover this expense. We all know what's going to happen with this.
Well, we're
But
certainly
it
not
won't be
going
the
to,
city paying for it
we're certainly
anymore.
not going to recoup that from the deadbeat tenant that left owing us several months of rent and tore our place up, you know, and left their garbage in the place. No, we're not going to recoup it from there. You know, it's a market situation. There's only so much the market can bear. We all know this because we have to set deposits where the market will allow that tenant to pay a deposit, to pay rent, and so forth. So, you know, this is the thing I'm objecting to, is the city is abdicating its responsibility totally They're just saying, you know, we got a problem, you landlords fix it, you, at your expense, and we're just out of this business. That's all. I disagree. I think the city should continue to bear responsibility. Why not have the grab-all truck show up at the very moment that the sheriff is there to evict? We can take the stuff right out, grab-all can put it in, it's not on the curb, it's not a blight on the community. Sound like a plan to me. But the city needs to pay for that grab-all coming around, following the sheriff for the evictions.
Thanks, Jim. I don't totally disagree with a lot of what you said, but it just looks like if we don't come up with something, something's gonna be passed that would be much worse.
I'm just thinking, again, we said that we'd be willing to compromise to do that part of it. But this 24-hour thing is what's causing us to have to bring another crew back the next day. That's what I'm saying. If we can fix that, then we're not spending our time 2 days in a row to handle an eviction for somebody that's in default. To give them 24 hours to come back and get what they want, and then leave the rest of it for us to take it off. So I don't know why somewhere in that process that we can't include that reasonable notice, a reasonable opportunity for them to get their stuff before the sheriff gets there.
Yeah, I agree. If there's a safe, legal way to remove the belongings the day of the eviction, I'm all for it.
Hey, now, when the people move and they set their stuff out by the curb, and we don't do an eviction, the city's still gonna pick it up, right? Yes?
We're working on that.
If there's not an eviction.
In my opinion,
Yes.
in my opinion, we might need to address that too. I mean, we're not addressing that yet.
But right now, yes.
Well,
It is. That's why we're addressing this first, because this is a business. It's a business run in a home. But if we can't get, these are growing pains. You know, Columbus has grown, and we're in a transition on how to be able to supply the needs to the majority of the citizenry within, you know, the means of the employees we have in the city, the resources we have in the city, and we've fallen behind, and we're trying to figure out a way in a lot of areas on how we can better serve our citizens. And we're going to have to pull back on some services and maybe address them in different ways. We're asking you guys to work with us so that at least you have some buy-in into this. I mean, I do not want to sit up here and vote a burden onto people without having some buy-in on your part. And I think you guys have come up with some really great ideas here tonight. And I think it was you, Ricky, that came up with this idea, you know, about putting it straight into a truck last time too. I mean, it's brilliant. It actually solves all of our issues.
And also a list for fire eviction. We need to do that, Stone County is not following in or whatever.
What are you saying?
You know, when we like to where people have previously been evicted.
yeah. One thing I wanted to add, Councilor Crabb did, I mean, if I hope I didn't hear that the city is looking on regular bulk items for people that moved out or whatever. It sounds like that y'all are talking about eventually having additional fees.
I know that I'm going to be beaten up by this. I get it. Not everybody's talking about it, but I have started to talk about it.
Okay.
Because I don't know about you, but I'm getting sick and tired of people, I don't see how it's really my responsibility to pay for, somebody else else's old couch or mattress or whatever to be taken away. When I have bulk items at my house, I don't want it sitting in my front yard, so I hire J-Dog to come by and get all of my stuff and take it away. I don't want to put my stuff out on the front yard for my neighbors to see.
Okay, so you're saying not just landlords, you're saying owner-occupied homes too?
Yes, we're required by
okay.
law, to do household waste, recycling, and are we required to do yard by law? Or is that just something that we do?
By law, it's household garbage.
So which is
Recycling.
household
That's what-
garbage
by
and
law.
recycling by law, that's all. The $18 that people pay, that's to cover those two things. The other things that we've been picking up, that's just been a little bit concierge, a little bit above and beyond. And we may have to readdress some of the things that we do as we get bigger, as we may not be able to do those things.
Well, I just, mainly talking about landlords and property owners, I just think we need to have laws that are not too restrictive so that we encourage investment for people to want to buy property.
I totally agree.
When people buy, investors buy properties, 9 out of 10 times they fix them up, they bring them up, they provide a place for someone to live, they collect rent, it's good for the city. And my only fear is that if we have too many ordinances that are punitive to landlords, that could discourage investment. So the state of Georgia is open for business, and I hope Columbus will stay friendly to businesses too.
I agree.
I understand the eviction is an issue, but I just think in the future, hopefully we can have, encourage investment.
I agree.
We have this gentleman here that's been waiting.
Yes, sir.
My name is Donald Hicks. I realize that the city says there's a problem with the eviction, trash removal, and they are placing it on one particular area, the landlords. I think the city bears responsibility. Landlord, I don't see where they come into play. The tenant moves this material into your property. The landlord had nothing to do with moving them in.
Sure they did.
I think the tenant should be also factored in this equation, because when they're being evicted from us, we're already in the hole with the tenant.
I agree.
We shouldn't have to bear the brunt of what you're all deciding on doing here. It's not equally distributed. The problem is right now angled at landlords. Supposedly the landlord doesn't have a vehicle to take this material to the landlord, to the landfill. And when the sheriff brings the property out of the apartment, do they place it on the tenant property or the right-of-way of the city?
Currently, they direct the.
They put it on the landlord's property?
No, they put it on the city right away.
Okay. By the property being placed on city property, should it not be factored of a city's being obligated because it's on the easement?
Well, if I had my way, the city would pick it up.
Well, it shouldn't be factored in just the landlord only, and it should be a three-party issue. If you are going to obligate the landlord if he doesn't pay that $500 fee, what obligation are you placing on the tenant?
The
And
landlord
does the
places
city
the
have
responsibility.
any liability in this game?
The landlord places the responsibility on the tenant through the lease process. The city government has not created any kind of a relationship with that tenant. We do have a relationship with the landlord through property ownership.
Okay, but by the property being placed on city right of way, that doesn't obligate you to dispose of it?
That's what we're changing.
But that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, and I agree, just like the lady spoke earlier, ideally, a tenant that hasn't been able to pay rent for a month or two, you would think at a minimum, the least they would do is retrieve their belongings and leave the property ready to rent. Unfortunately, that is not the case. But anyway, I think we had a good meeting, and appreciate Councilor Craft facilitating this. And this
Thank you,
job.
Tom, for standing up and taking this on.
Thank you.
I know nobody don't want to go up on taxes. Wouldn't it be better to go up $1 on the trash and let everybody, you have plenty of money to pay, see, the city could hire garbage trucks and have more money that way than it would 500.
I would be in favor of the garbage fee that is paid with the Columbus Waterworks bill, if that were raised
$1, yeah,
enough.
more money.
And I'm sure the city's gonna say that's just for regular garbage pickup. I don't know what their position on that is, but I would be in favor of a marginal increase to compensate for the bulk waste removal. That's a great idea.
That'd be a lot of money, a lot more than trying to get $500. I thank y'all for showing up.
Thank you, Don.
For-profit business. It's still a for-profit business. We got to get out.
There was a vote for the meeting that you have tomorrow, I think. You asked for a vote on one discussion we just had. Right. I think we should get a vote on some of the other things that's been discussed today, so that when you go to the meeting, at least you'll have more of a feel of what everyone here is thinking. Because, it's been discussed on both sides. So maybe there should be a show of hands on the different options that's been discussed today.
All right, well, what do you think we should be voting on? There's been a number of ideas that have been floated.
One was talking about the city paying for it themselves, rather than it be put on the landlord.
I think everybody would vote in favor of that. Except them.
There was about 3 different options that came out during this discussion.
But that one's not an option no more, because the city's not going to do it.
So that's completely on the table. What about the taxes? The amount of money, the city right now is completely out of handling any of this. Is that correct?
Any bulk waste resulting from an eviction, yeah.
Right now, strictly eviction, right?
Right now, strictly evictions. We're taking baby steps.
Well, I don't think we have too many.
And let me tell you, the reason why we're doing this is because, with evictions, is because they're trackable. We can track them. We can't track when someone moves out of one of our properties. We can't track when it's an owner putting their stuff out. You can track evictions because it's going through the court system.